Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. Bienvenidos a todos. Si prefieres escuchar a este webinario en español, hay instrucciones aquí, or if you could move to the instructions slide. Y también hay instrucciones en un correo que les mandé hace una media hora. Si tienes alguna pregunta sobre la interpretación, usa el chat. So just saying, if you prefer to listen to this webinar in Spanish, there's instructions on the screen, as well as in an email I sent around half an hour ago. And if you have any instructions about that, you can use the chat. Laura will be presenting in English, and we have Spanish language interpretation on the Spanish channel. I'll get started just by introducing quickly Laura, the presenter for today. Laura is a soil technical assistance provider and TOPP coordinator with NOFA Mass. She's also an organic certifier with Baystate Organic Certifiers. For over 10 years, Laura ran Long Life Farm in Hopkinton, along with her husband, Donald Sutherland, and they grew certified organic vegetables in a no-till regenerative system. I'll let Laura take it away since we have a ton of information for you.
A lot to cover in 1 hour, but welcome. Thanks for coming in out of the sun on this beautiful day. And for those of you that have not heard of the Transition to Organic Partnership Program, it is a USDA funded program where farmers that would like to transition to organic can receive a farmer mentor for a full year at no charge. And also part of that program is also to receive technical assistance navigating the organic certification process. So we encourage you, if you are in that situation, to sign up at organictransition.org. I'm going to start off today by talking about the organic standards, because it's important to understand these standards. Most people think organic is simply without chemicals or without pesticides. But in fact, there's a major soil practice standard that's required by the National Organic Program. And these bullets will identify those items. So the producer must select and implement tillage and cultivation practices that maintain or improve the physical, chemical, and biological condition of soil and minimize soil erosion. And they also must manage crop nutrients and soil fertility through crop rotations, using cover crops, and the application of plant and animal materials. That means things like compost. The producer must manage plant and animal materials to maintain or improve soil organic matter. That's a really important baseline. And it's why when you apply for organic certification, the certifier will ask you for a soil test, which will show them what your organic matter percentage is. And then this blue paragraph here talks about amendments that organic growers can use. And that's really the premise of this entire presentation, is how organic growers choose amendments and how they need to get them approved before they use them. And of course, the producer must not use synthetic substances or pesticides, and no sewage sludge or biosolids are allowed. Okay, so how can you be sure amendments are compliant with organic standards? I thought I would just talk a little bit about the organic application. This box or this table is an exact replica of something that you would find in the application. It would ask you for all of your fertility inputs by the name of the product, the brand or manufacturer, and most importantly, whether it's approved, A, R for restricted, or P for prohibited. Those are very important to know. And sometimes people use organic amendments and they automatically assume they're approved because they have a certain organic label on them. So it's important to really delve into this process of how to make sure they're compliant. First of all, you might see this OMRI. Let me just get my pointer out there. You might see this OMRI label logo on the bag of fertilizer. That stands for the Organic Material Review Institute. And that is a searchable database that you can go to and look up products that you might want to be trying or using if it's not already in your application. So at the beginning of the year, you fill out your application, you say, these are all the fertility inputs that I'll be using. And then you might come across one that you want to try, and you need to go to OMRI. So I'm going to enter in nitrate of soda, which is the same thing as Chilean nitrate. And you'll notice it'll come up with a bunch of different symbols, mostly flags. The one that you're looking for, if you're in the US, is the United States flag. If you see an X, that means it's prohibited, and you should not use that under any circumstances, because that will force that field out of organic production for 3 years. When you see a R, that means you can use it, but there are certain things that you have to do before as a last. You can only use the product as a last resort. So things that you might do before you use this product are utilized cultural practices like spacing or weeding or picking varieties of plants that are low disease targets. This in particular is a really good exercise to go through with OMRI. And if it tells you it's R and not A for approved, then you simply need to go and read the restriction and follow it. And the certifier will ask you how you're following that restriction. Okay, that's omri.org, and that's a very important tool for organic growers. Okay. Let me just stop share for a second and I'll go back. Okay. Okay, so use OMRI and you will be able to figure out whether the amendments you want to use can be used for organic certified farms. Okay. All right, so I mentioned that soil organic matter is really important, and the certifier will require a copy of your soil test so that they can monitor how you're doing in terms of improving soil organic matter. So they'll look at your baseline percentage, and we're going to look at a soil report in a second, and then they'll ask you to do a soil test on a regular basis, either every 2 years, every 3 years, every year, perhaps. So when you're looking at your soil test, you only want to add nutrients that are deficient. You don't want to continue to add nutrients that the soil doesn't need. It's a waste of money, and it can also impact the uptake of other minerals. For example, habitual applications of amendments can oversupply nutrients. This is a problem with people using too much manure-based compost. The phosphorus levels can be very high, and excessive phosphorus can lock up other nutrients like calcium. So organic matter should be monitored as a measurement of current soil practices. This is a soil test for my farm, and you'll notice that a couple of things here that I want to point out. Here is the organic matter right here. 5.75. So if you'll remember that number is going to help us as we're calculating our nutrient needs. And as I mentioned, only use amendments that have a deficiency. So if it has a negative down here, if it has a negative, those are the amendments that I will be adding. I won't be adding magnesium because -1 or -2 is not enough to really add magnesium. I might add some trace elements too, but it's really important for you to have a baseline soil test when you're starting to get organically certified. Okay, so how do we calculate nitrogen fertilizer? And as you know, if you've worked on any conventional farms, conventional growers rely heavily on synthetic nitrogen fertilizers. Organic growers don't use those same types of nitrogen fertilizer. We use slow release nitrogen fertilizers. So you need to build up the organic matter because the more points that you have in your organic matter, the more Mother Nature will supply nitrogen. So generally accepted that under dry land conditions, if there's no irrigation at all, you'll receive free 10 pounds of nitrogen per acre from Mother Nature for each point of organic matter. So you remember that 5.75 number I showed you on the soil test? Then you would multiply that by 10, and that would give you about 55 pounds of nitrogen from Mother Nature. That's a okay amount, but it's not enough to grow high demand crops like tomatoes. So you'll need to add a supplemental nitrogen amendment. And there's different amounts that we use for irrigated land, 15 pounds of nitrogen for each point of organic matter. If you had a previous legume cover crop on the soil, you can take an extra 5 pounds for a total of 20 nitrogen. And then if you also left crop residue in the field, Mother Nature will deliver 25 pounds of nitrogen per acre. We do have a nitrogen calculator, which we can send you if you would like, that helps you identify the type and the amount of nitrogen that you might need. Okay, this is a picture of cover crop, and it's being cut down right now with a weed whacker. This is a small greenhouse, and you'll notice there's a really heavy mat of cover crops. This is the sort of thing that you want to keep the soil covered at all times with green plants. And they will, those cover crops will help repay you in many different ways in terms of more organic matter, additional water infiltration, water holding capacity. It's really important to use cover crops, and it is required for organic growers. And this is a picture at Big Train Farm in Rhode Island. So when you're looking at different nitrogen amendments, these numbers that you might see are the percentage of nitrogen in the bag, but you still have to calculate how much you need. And so let's just say that you already have 55 pounds of nitrogen from Mother Nature, but you want to grow tomatoes. Tomatoes take about 140 pounds of nitrogen. So you're going to need 140 minus 55, right? So you're going to need quite a bit of nitrogen. So whatever amount that you find you need, this is how you will calculate it. If you need 50 pounds of nitrogen, you take 50 pounds and you divide it by the percentage that's on the bag. So in this case, blood meal is 12% nitrogen. So we're dividing 50 pounds by 0.12, which means that we need almost 417 pounds per acre of blood meal if we use that. With smaller percentages, you'll need more volume of these types of nitrogen amendments. And if you have smaller than an acre, then of course you just have to prorate that for the amount of square footage that you have. Magnesium is can be generally is the very first item when I'm looking at soil tests that I calculate, because we have very few amendments that we can count on for magnesium when it comes to organic growing. I don't generally add magnesium unless it's very low, because magnesium can have a tendency to tighten the soils. So there is, even if it's just a small bit deficient, I generally don't add magnesium. But if you do need magnesium, it is important to have it. Dolomitic lime has 13% magnesium and calcium, and this would be used if you need magnesium, as long as your pH is low, because that dolomitic lime will raise your pH. Sulpomag is another magnesium amendment that we use often, it has 11% magnesium, but also has potassium and sulfur. And Epsom salt has 10% magnesium. When we talk about pH, our ideal pH that we see on the soil report, you'll want that to be somewhere between 6.3 and 6.5. And the reason is because you're going to get the most amount of availability of all of the required minerals and trace elements at a certain range of pH. So it is important to make sure that you're in that range. I mean, generally, if you're between 6 and 7, you're okay. You don't have to mess with it too much. But if you're at 7.4, you're going to want to bring that down. If you're at 5, you're going to want to bring it up, and unless you're growing blueberries. And so how do we do that? How do we do that as organic growers? How do we change the pH? Okay. So pH, the only way that you can let pH balance itself over time, as you're looking at balancing your calcium and magnesium, it will eventually balance on its own. But sometimes it does take a couple of years for it to do that. So if your pH is above 7, you can use elemental sulfur to bring it down and to build your sulfur reserves. All of our soils in the Northeast are deficient in sulfur. If you want to raise pH, then you need to use a limestone. So it can either be dolomitic limestone if you need magnesium as well as calcium, or it should be high calcium limestone, which has a low amount of magnesium and a much higher amount of calcium. So these are very important to understand. If your pH is in a good range, then you don't want to use either elemental sulfur or a limestone, because you will be adjusting it. So if you still need calcium, but you don't need to adjust pH, then you want to use a different type of calcium besides limestone. And we find that aragonite is a really good calcium amendment, carbonatite, gypsum, which also has sulfur, and or a liquid calcium that won't change the pH. So that's very important. Okay, so these are some of the other calcium amendments. I mentioned the 2 limestones, high cal limestone, dolomitic limestone. It is important that you not buy any limestone that you find at the corner nursery. There are some that are mined in such a way that make them prohibited to organic growers. And that could be a real tragedy if you use it and you have to wait another 3 years for organic certification. This is where the certifier really comes in handy, is they will help you identify compliance and make sure that you don't use something that you shouldn't. Once they receive your application, they'll look at your fertility inputs and they say they're all compliant, and then you're good to go. And you're listing them all for the entire year. It's not just what you used last year, but what you're planning on using this year. So it's really important for you to work with your certifier to get help, because if you're not sure, if you can't find it on OMRI, or it doesn't have a label on the bag that says OMRI approved, your certifier can help you identify whether it is or not. And then, I believe these cows were at Cricket Creek in Williamstown, but there can't be too much of a good thing, and that is manure. Okay, phosphorus P is probably one of the minerals on, if I looked at 100 soil tests, 99 of those would have levels of phosphorus that are way, way too high. And it's easy to think that compost every year is a good thing, but if it's made with manure and you're adding it every single year, the phosphorus can get out of control. So you need to really look at that and be careful. You can use compost that is not made with manure, in which case it would have little or no phosphorus, and still give you the biological activity that you're looking for, and weed control that you're looking for. So that's why the soil test is so important for you to see exactly where your phosphorus levels are. If you are getting manure in from another farm besides your own farm, the certifier would want you to ask that farm for a email stating that nothing was applied to the manure pile or to the bedding from the horse stalls. Some farms might apply something prohibited, like a fly inhibitor or something of that nature, and then would be a problem for you to put on your beds. So you'll want to just make sure that before you use any manure from off farm, that it's safe for your organic fields. And under no circumstances should you use sewage sludge. This is, you know, the wastewater from waste treatment plants that is sold throughout the United States, except for now Maine. And they have been found to have PFAS contamination in sludge. So it's never been allowed in organic production, but now especially it's a good reason for conventional farms not to use it as well. The Mass Department of Agriculture regulates phosphorus and when it comes to use on non-agricultural lands. So it's really important that we as farmers not over fertilize with phosphorus, especially if you're near water. A couple of phosphorus amendments besides compost are bone meal, which has 15% phosphorus, and bone char, which has 16. And then there are others that have 3 to 4%. Calphos, Fertaz is a brand name, rock phosphate, crab, and fish meal also have 3 to 4% of phosphorus. Okay. Potassium is one of those minerals. I would say that last year when we had so much rain, the minerals that wash out the fastest really are potassium and nitrogen. So, you know, if we have severe rainstorms like we had last year, you might see yellowing in your plants. It could either be because the potassium and or the nitrogen is washing through. It doesn't stay around as long when you have those types of rains that we had last year. So if you have very sandy soil that doesn't hold on to minerals well, and has a low cation exchange capacity, that's another number on your soil report that will tell you how well that soil holds on to minerals. But even a good high number of 12 of the CEC, cation exchange capacity, with heavy rains, you will still get some leaching of nitrogen and potassium. So generally, if I see a soil report that's a well-balanced calcium, magnesium, sulfur soil, they will often be deficient in both nitrogen and potassium. These are some of your potassium amendments. Potassium sulfate or potassium sulfate is the one that is generally used because you get a lot of 51% in each bag. And it also has sulfur, 17% sulfur. And here again, Supplemag comes into play if you need both magnesium and potassium and sulfur. Green sand, kelp meal, and wood ash are also amendments that can be used to amend for potassium. And a little bit on cover crops again. You can, it's really amazing that you don't have to, I try to tell farmers to strategize about getting those cover crops in at any time of the year. This time of year, you know, you can put in cover crops in end of March, early April, and then mow them and tarp them or till them in a week or two before you're planting your tomatoes, and you're keeping those beds covered with a good green crop, good plant crop, so that the plants can photosynthesize and push down exudates into the soil and take care of your microbes. So it's really important whenever you can to get your cover crops in, either early in the spring, mid-summer, or even after your cash crop is done in September, October. Okay, so I mentioned a little bit about micronutrients. Micronutrients are micro because they are only needed in parts per million, or ppm, parts per million. And these are also called trace elements, and they are important for all various parts of the plant's growing process. And some of them you may have to have a soil test to show the certifier that you are deficient in these before you use them. That's usually what's required. Most all soils are deficient in boron in the Northeast. I've only seen a couple that are not deficient in manganese as well. But zinc and copper tend to be those items that you can get up to the limit real quick with zinc and copper. So if you are using any micronutrients, it's important to have a soil test every year. Otherwise, the certifier will tell you that you can't use them unless you show them a test that says you're deficient in these trace elements. Okay, they're all restricted, so they're all R's. I do tend to think that it's a little simpler to think about using a broad spectrum of micronutrients, and I will often recommend for people to use kelp meal and or azomite because they have a very broad range of micronutrients in them, and they are not a restricted product. They're a natural product. Liquid micronutrients are definitely more available to the plant. These can be purchased from Fedco or Advancing Eco Agriculture. They have liquid boron, they have liquid manganese, they have all of those liquids that, and scientists have found that the plant actually can recognize them a lot easier and bring them up into the plant more so than dry materials when it comes to the micronutrients. Foliar spraying is also appreciated by the plants when you're using these micronutrients. They can be taken up immediately, and otherwise, you put manganese on your soil as a dry amendment. It takes years to move that needle in terms of bringing that reserve up. Liquid kelp is also really good organic foliar spray that is a broad micronutrient as well as a good food for microbes. Okay, so we can do our best to balance the minerals in the soil, but without a active biological community, you're not going to have as much success in growing a productive plant. So the biology is really extremely important. And so for many soils that are worn out or, have been over-tilled or used, with conventional type of synthetic chemicals for a long time, the life can virtually be gone. So you have to bring that back if you are transitioning to organic, and it's really important. So I think if you're a transitioning grower, biology can certainly make the difference in terms of you keeping up with the same yields between conventional organic. Those that don't use biology could take 5 years to have the same yields in transition, but those that use biology can find the same type of yields as they did when they were growing conventionally. And this is really, when I talk about biology, we're talking about the soil food web. We're talking about bacteria, fungi, nematodes, and more. They eat each other, they eat organic matter, they poop it out, and then the nutrients are available to the plants. And in a conventional scenario, we're feeding the plants NPK. And very often the biology are not there because they're not necessarily needed, but most soils are deficient in biology, and that's some of the things that you need to focus on in terms of the benefit to adding biology. This can be done in various ways. Certainly your practices bring biology back. Cover crops, reduced tillage, keeping the soil covered, mulching with various mulches. This is the soil food web. They're sort of in the order in which they eat each other, and it's a very important part of organic production. And this is a picture, I think it's 400 times magnified, of lots of different bacteria in the soil. Scientists don't know all of the microorganisms in the soil yet. There's millions and millions and millions underneath our feet. Often very beneficial, sometimes not, but it's important to think about this biology in terms of being your best helper. So we recommend some inoculants and seed inoculant. You can put a little bit of seed inoculant in your seed packet and shake it up. The ones with mycorrhiza fungi are really critical. I would not be planting my seedlings without a mycorrhiza fungi seed coat. You're probably used to using inoculants for your legume seed for peas and beans, and that's the rhizobium type of seed inoculant. If your soil doesn't have rhizobium, you're definitely going to need this type of inoculant for your legumes. Also, there's products like OM1, Spectrum, Organic Micro 5000. These are all beneficial bacteria that can be added to your drench water, to your fertigation. When you're watering, you can also add them to a backpack sprayer, to foliar spray, and they will definitely help. You can spray them on the soil, you can spray them on the plant, you can spray them on the cover crop. And oftentimes what you want to do is add some food for the microbes so they have something to eat while they're getting busy. That would be liquid kelp, fish hydrolysate, and some water that's diluting those. The vermicompost is very popular, and also just like regular compost needs to be approved for organic use. Vermicompost needs to be approved for organic use also. And the worm castings have a very diverse biology that can really help, if you wanted to put, a handful in the planting hole of your tomatoes, or you can make compost tea out of it. It is all about adding additional biology. And you just have to make sure any inoculants you use as a certified grower are non-GMO. That's very important. Okay, so in terms of record keeping, often I hear from potential farmers when they say they don't want to certify, they believe that it's a lot of work. Well, the first time around, when you're first applying, getting all the information together can be a little confusing, but I do help people do this all the time, and I make their lives a lot easier. So just know that there's somebody there to help you navigate the process. The first year, as I mentioned, might be the most onerous, but most businesses need to keep records anyway, because you need to be comparing what you did last year to this year, and so forth. So in terms of organic production, you want to just have a file for each year that has all invoices that you've purchased for amendments for your organic seed. Keep it all in one file and you'll be good to go. You want to retain that for 5 years so that it can be audited when you have an inspection. Every time you use an amendment, you want to write it down someplace so that, maybe you applied 1,000 pounds of limestone, some high ag lime. You put that on your home field, and you put that on in, November of 2023. And those are the types of input records you need to keep on everything that you apply to your fields. I find it really easy to do a Google Sheet or a Google Doc for listing any inputs. It's also a listing of all of my activities, so the crew knows. And then when the inspector comes, it's searchable. So I can just say, okay, when did I apply limestone? And I can go back to that date just by searching limestone and show the inspector my record. So try to make things easier on yourself. Production records are critical. One of the exercises that the inspector will do is called an audit trail or a traceback exercise. It can also be called. They're going to start with a sales record. So maybe that's what you sold at the farmer's market. Maybe that's this week's farm share CSA record of what you delivered to your customers. You start with that record. So maybe there's 20 pounds of tomatoes on that sales record. The inspector will say, okay, what field did those tomatoes come from? So perhaps that's your home field, number one. And the inspector will ask, okay, so what was the date of harvest? Well, we just harvested those a couple days ago, April 1st. And then how much square footage or row feet was planted? What was your transplant date? And what was your seeding date? These are part of your production plans generally. And then the inspector will ask for you to show them where that seed was purchased from. So a seed invoice coming out of your folder of all your invoices. And that is what we call a complete audit, a complete traceback exercise. And that all those records that I just mentioned, you would have to have so that you can show the inspector as they're auditing that trail of from seed invoice to sale. There's also a requirement for organic growers to source organic seed wherever possible, wherever commercially available. And so if you happen to decide that you're going to grow purple cauliflower, and you go to Johnny's, and the only one that they have is non-organic, then you go to Fedco, and you see that they have purple cauliflower, but it's non-organic. So then you go to High Mowing and you see that they have no purple cauliflower to speak of. You've searched for 3 companies and you've written that down in your notebook and you've said, this is the date I was searching and these are the companies I checked. That's a record of your organic seed search, which is required as an organic grower. If you are not able to find it after those 3 searches, you can order the non-organic seed. And that's totally fine as long as it doesn't have a coating on it that's not compliant. Generally, those companies I just mentioned have all signed the Safe Seed Pledge. They're not selling GMOs, but for Johnny's, you do need to check to make sure, because they have a couple seeds with a coating that would be prohibited for organic production. Those are mostly flower seeds. Okay, so organic certificates. Each organization that's certified organic has an organic certificate, and that will be important for you to have. Why should you have it? Okay, let's just say that you want to order a seed, but you're not sure if that seed company is certified organic. Ask them for their organic certificate. Sometimes you'll find it on their website. The Organic Integrity Database also has a list of organic operations. And starting this year, as of March 19th, organic certificates will be also available on the Organic Integrity Database. So it'll be a lot easier on operations to find organic ingredients. So for example, what do you care about on the organic certificate? You're looking for something called an issue date, because there's lots of different dates on these certificates and it can be a little confusing. So this is Strictly Medicinals, where I get some great organic herb seeds and flower seeds. You'll notice that they have a date here, certified by on this date. The effective date is here and the anniversary date is here. None of those dates are important to you. What you care about is the issue date. So from this date of 2/13, you have 18 months to buy seeds from this operation and still be compliant. Okay, so you have 18 months from the issue date to buy seeds from them and still be compliant. And then next year, when you go to order seeds, if you're not still within 18 months, you need to get a new certificate from that company. Okay. How are we doing? Okay, we're doing good. Okay, so what is the transition timeline? Oftentimes, if you're new to your property, if you're renting from a landlord, that property has to have at least 3 years with no prohibited substance. So when I rented my farm, which is only 2.5 acres, the landlord hadn't done anything but mow hay for 15 years. And so that was more than 3 years that it was without any prohibited substances. So I was able to go ahead and fill out my paperwork and get certified right away without waiting 3 years. But if anything has been put on those fields, let's just say if you're a new buyer and you're just starting a farm, you may not know what happened 3 years ago, so you would have to wait 3 years. And that's really important. That's kind of the baseline for this. And the good news is that this year, for the very first time, certifiers will accept a transitional plan for a farm. And that will enable the certifier to get involved with the transitioning farm early and have you on the organic integrity database. It won't be visible to the public, but you can market yourself as a transitional organic farm. And why is that important? Well, you can access crop insurance programs by being transitional, and other types of programs from the USDA are available to transitional farms that may not have been an option if you were just waiting for 3 years and you didn't have this new form. So it's something brand new this year. If you're in this situation, it would be good to fill one out, because then at least you can have some other benefits of being certified. You can't use the USDA logo yet, but you can tell people that you're transitional. Okay. This is the first form I have people fill out when they are thinking about certifying, because it will identify the inputs that are used from 2021 to 2023 and what's being planned for 2024. All the crops that were grown, maybe it's hay, maybe it's just grass, in each of these years as well. And this would be signed by the manager. And in the case of a lease that you have with a landlord, the landlord could sign this as well, that says that they have not used anything prohibited. And that's called a field history affidavit for new fields, pastures, and any in-ground greenhouse production. Okay, so I'm just about to the end of my slides, and I know I went over the minerals pretty quick. Just know that there are people out there that can help. If you have a soil test, NOFA Mass does this as well. You can order a soil test and send in your soil to Logan Labs via the NOFA Mass website. You can get an analysis and a list of the organic recommendations, the amendments that your soil needs as well. The other great soil service that we have is called a biological assessment, and that would be a soil sample that would be sent in, and one of our microscopists would look at your soil underneath the microscope and tell you if you have the right amount and types of microbes and fungal to bacteria ratio that you need to grow a productive crop. And then we also have something called a soil health assessment, which is actually done on farm. It takes about a half a day, but it can be a really interesting baseline for farms if they really want to know and start learning about how to assess their own soil health And that's really important if you're, you know, if you're certified or not. And we encourage you, if you are interested in being certified, to or to have a mentor. We will start assigning new mentors in September. So you have time to sign up to get matched with a mentor in that grouping in September. We now have had 2 different groupings, one last fall and one in March that we just finished. And we would be, right now in Massachusetts, we have 16 transitioning farms and mentors that are helping them. And we have 140 transitioning farms in our Northeast region. So it's really exciting. The program has brought in great expertise for people to get help. And again, help with the paperwork of the organic submission is also part of this process. So that is the end of my slides, and I'd be happy to take any questions. Should I stop sharing, Annie? Yeah, I just wanted to comment to Annie's, Amy, yes, we cannot use any non-organic seeds that are coated with something that's prohibited. And of course, we cannot use genetically modified seeds either, but you can use a non-organic seed if you cannot find the organic that is commercially available. The supply of organic seed has dramatically improved over the last 10 years. There's a lot more organic seed growers, and maybe as an organic grower, you might learn how to save seeds and sell them as well.
Hi, Laura.
Hello.
It's Pedro from Mexico. I got a question about wood ash as a potassium amendment.
Yes.
Can it be a problem with the pH, with raising the pH of soil?
It can be. Yes, it definitely can be a problem with raising the pH. So there are some published studies coming out of Maine that talk about wood ash, and they don't suggest that you use wood ash as all of the potassium that you need because of that reason. And if your pH is already at a good level between 6.3 and 6.5, then you shouldn't be using wood ash to amend for potassium.
Thanks.
Sorry, I should have let the interpreters interpret that question. I'm hoping I'm not going too fast. I think one of the things that is clear when farmers are transitioning from a conventional system to an organic system is that they are definitely needing less nitrogen than they are used to using when they are in a conventional system. And so we have found that as they put cover crops down and learn how to manage in an organic system, it enables them to use less nitrogen than they were used to, less chemicals, less cost as well over the a 3 to 5 year period.
I have another question, Laura.
Sure.
Yep. You're talking about the transition now, and if we see like in the first years of transition, if we see some deficiency, should we be patient with it, or we get foliar like foliar feeding right to it, like to let the biology to make some work, you know? So should we be so patient with the deficiency, or?
Well, no, I don't think you should sacrifice your cash crop. I guess it depends upon which deficiency you're seeing. Generally, it's going to be, some nitrogen. And so you kind of have to plan for the longer term release of that nitrogen. Organic growers, depending upon their temperatures in the early spring, I know in the north, probably not the case in Mexico, but in the north, organic growers try to use a more soluble nitrogen like a Chilean nitrate, but they don't use that for the whole season long. They just use it in cold soils. But yes, if you're seeing some yellowing, if that's what you mean by you're seeing some problems, then it can be addressed with a side dressing of nitrogen or potassium if that's the case.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions that people have? How much does your geology affect nutrient availability long term? There's 3 different pillars that we talk about in soil health, and one of them is physical. So looking at the physical aspects of the soil, is it sandy? Does it have a lot of clay in it? Do you have aggregates? Do you have clumps? Do you have any compaction? So those types of physical attributes is one of the things that can affect the success of the crop for sure. It also is a home for microbes and a home for holding water. And so the physical attributes of soil are very important. I mentioned the other two pillars during this presentation. Chemical, or the minerals themselves, the chemical portion of the soil, and then the biological portion of the soil. There are soil experts, visionaries. One of the ones that I follow is John Kemp from Advancing Eco-Agriculture, and he likes to say that you can grow a productive crop if you have a good community of biology, even if you don't have the right chemistry, but you can't grow a good crop with good chemistry and no biology. So I try to think of it that way, that it's great to be able to balance your soil minerals, apply those minerals that are deficient, but remember that those minerals are not going to be available to the plants unless the biology is there to make it available to the plants. So while we're getting to the top of the hour here, what does the soil bioassay, the biological assessment, you can find all these soil services on our website. And the soil biological assessment is rather pricey, I will say. But I will say too that there's a nice little gadget that we've used called the microbiometer. And the microbiometer is a small kit that enables the farmer to actually do testing of the biology on site if they have a smartphone. And it's a really cool little gadget. It takes about 20 minutes to do a test. And the microbes take up color in certain soils, different colors. And so it can measure the total carbon count of microbial biomass in your soil in 20 minutes. The kit you can actually buy from Microbiometer. We've had some for sale on our bulk order at NOFA Mass. And it's about $10 per test after you buy the kit. And you can do about 10 tests with the kit that you buy. And the thing I thought was interesting about that kit was that I could actually measure the biological changes based upon my practices. So, for example, I started using a compost tea. I measured the biological, the microbial assessment first. Then I planted my plants and I gave them some compost tea that was made out of worm castings. And then I did a bed the same, except without the compost tea. And then 2 weeks later, I measured the microbial biomass with the microbiometer to see how my practices affected the biology in my soil. And so you can do that with cover cropping. You can do that with reducing your tillage. You can see the effects of your practices on your biology by using those tools. But if you wanted to do a complete biological assessment and have somebody look at the soil under a microscope, that's a really great assessment. I think it's about $150 total, but you get a picture of your microbes and some insight as to, the life there. So that's sometimes, often at our conferences, we're doing this for no charge too. So we've done that in the past. Okay, so in the chat, can you discuss how an application of something like a compost that may oversupply minerals in a specific soil, what are the ramifications of such an application? Generally, we're looking at compost, and you're going to find compost that's well-made, that's very biological active. You might find compost that's not made with any manure, so maybe it's a little bit less biologically active. And so oftentimes I will see livestock farmers, if they have cattle, if they have goats, they're really trying to use their manure on their own land and use it for their own fertility. But what I see on those farms year after, I'm talking 20, 30 years, they've been using the same compost. We see extremely high phosphorus. We see extremely high zinc, and we see extremely high copper. And it's difficult it takes a long time once you stop using phosphorus, manure compost, to bring that phosphorus back down. So it's important not to get into that situation to begin with. But hopefully that answers your question about oversupply of a good thing. It definitely is a great thing to use if you need the biology and you need soil organic matter and you're just starting and building your fertility. Those, a good compost is really important, but you shouldn't overuse it. Yes, I mentioned the transition to organic partnership. Unfortunately, it's not in Mexico, but it is throughout the United States. So if any of you are joining us from outside of Massachusetts, you have a TOPP coordinator in each of your states that you could inquire about. So if you go to that organictransition.org, you can still sign up anywhere in the United States. The biological assessments, generally there is a recommendation for general fertility. Whether it's specific to a particular crop, I'd have to ask our expert on microscopy about if it's on a specific crop, and I don't know the answer to that, but we could certainly find out for you if you wanted to put your email in the chat. Is that MLOCURTIN? Okay. It's possible we have a sample of that report that you can see. Okay. Looks like there's an evaluation in the chat, both in English and Spanish. Many of our events are translated or interpreted in Spanish, so please join us for more events. We have a lot of different workshops this year. I think we have over 30 events this year, so we're many of those are being interpreted. I really thank you for joining us today. If no one has any more questions. Thank you.